Good morning, Lourdes, and good morning to everyone. Welcome back to Coaching Conversation. I'm Maria Sabia.
And I'm Lourdes Labor. Make sure to stick around until the end for some practical tools that will help you turn correction into one of your greatest superpowers.
Yeah, let's just dive in. Let's go with this imaginary scenario. Okay, you're working at you're at work, you're in a meeting, you've just pitched your idea, and then someone raises their hand and they point out, hey, that's wrong, this wrong. Maybe you didn't look at this. They point out all the flaws, and you start to cringe, right? And or you're at home, right? And your partner, they remember a story differently from what you remember the story, and then you start you start arguing about who's right instead of what really matters. You missed the entire point of why you even began to tell the story.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is like a very universal thing, right? I don't think anyone really loves to be corrected. And so, maybe you're in a meeting, but maybe it's online. Maybe you posted something that you were sure about, right? And then someone drops a comment that basically disproves what you've just said. And it's like a gut punch, right? You feel that jolt, your face gets hot, your heart races, and all you want to do is defend yourself, right? You get into battle mode.
Yeah, yeah, right. You check Snoops and go, oh my God, was I right or was I wrong? Because you want to show them, right? Then you're wrong and you just delete the post, quietly seething. But, you know, that's the feeling that we're going to be tackling today, that internal resistance to being corrected. And this episode is for, people like you, like me, who sometimes we have that surge of pride that need to defend at all costs. We're going in for the whole thing. And, even when deep down inside, we suspect that they might be right, right? And this is about that subtle, quiet harm we actually inflict on ourselves by refusing to change. So, I actually remember this one client that, they had this issue, but he was a sales manager and he had a lot of chaos because his staff, couldn't communicate with him. He had salespeople and then he had his support staff. And when somebody tried to tell him, hey, why don't we try this, or we can improve it this way, or, God forbid he made a mistake that day and they pointed out the error or that they made a correction on something that he did without even telling him, he would just get infuriated. He would just go off the rails. And so because of that inability to get that feedback from other people that he was working with, he had to be the boss and he had to always be in command and he always had to be right. His team was really actually suffering. He had lost a couple of staff members. Was trying to constantly replace people, and his sales performance, his team wasn't doing as well as other people, other teams. So his boss finally told him he had to get anger management issues, because on the surface, it looks like anger management, right? Because it looks like somebody just gets pissed off all the time and you think it's anger management. And, well, he came to me, we worked it out, and, what he needed was to be able to pivot and, work on his ego and accept the correction and, see it as input, as feedback.
Yeah, in my youth, I worked under a manager that way, and she was really challenging to work for because she could never be wrong. And so as an employee, it was like it created a really toxic environment. If you can't even correct the simplest of mistakes, because they will not hear of it. So, we're going to challenge that impulse and show you that being proven wrong isn't a defeat. it's a victory in disguise. It's like the ultimate act of courage, admitting when you're wrong. It's actually freedom, because, when we're so tied up into our ego that, we can't possibly be wrong, that's not reality. That's not the real world that we live in. And we have to be able to accept feedback and correction. Hey, as a mom, I get that all the time from my daughters. I'm always wrong. Oh, I am so used to being wrong.
Yeah, I guess.
So let's talk about why it hurts so much when someone corrects us, right? That comment, that contradiction. It's not a physical attack. It's just new information, right? But our bodies react as if we're being personally judged. It feels like judgment because the unconscious belief running the show is, if I'm wrong, I'm not enough. If I change my mind, I'll look weak. And that's the false narrative. It's not the truth. It's ego.
Yeah, I could see where, as a parent, you know, some parents have the tendency to really like double down on their outdated rules, with their teenagers, because a lot of times they don't want to admit that they're wrong. They don't want to lose that that feeling that they're still in charge. They feel like they're losing authority. Or even the manager who sticks with a broken strategy, right? Even when the data is telling him that something's wrong, that there's an error. But it's because we feel like we can't pivot. We feel like it's a personal failure if we do pivot.
Yeah. I remember, like, another side of this is, I remember working with a client a while back who had a really hard time accepting feedback from her supervisor. Every time she received any critical response, any modification that needed to be made, any upgrade that the supervisor was looking for, she would kind of collapse into feeling unworthy, not good enough, and like she was being attacked. So she was constantly battling with her self-worth every time she needed to, go back and improve something. She was completely unable to handle constructive criticism and respond to the need to improve in some areas or modify the way that she was doing something. And that was a real blockage to her growth, with the organization. Her reactions were basically being fed by the inner scripts running in her head, and it was her perspective. But, once we were able to work on those, she was able to not equate the feedback as a threat, like a personal attack, right? And it also improved her personal relationships, right? Because let's be honest, how many arguments with partners or friends have spiraled, not because of the issue itself, but because neither person wanted to admit that they were wrong, right? I've been there. I'm sure you've been there, Maria. Not
many times. many times.
We get into a stance of protecting our fragile pride, and we end up damaging our relationships, our credibility, and our peace of mind.
Yeah, it's so true that inability to pivot is costly, and it really is damaging to ourselves. Clinging to being right is a self-deception. It's choosing ignorance over truth. And the person that it's most harming is, it's not that person who you've gotten the correction from or the feedback from. It's you, because you're reinforcing the prison of your ego. And that's the real harm. It's the lie we tell ourselves to avoid the momentary discomfort of humility, of saying, oh, let me look at it a different way. I mean, because we make it so huge, that tiny pivot that we have to make, instead of just saying, oh, okay, well, let's do it that way then. Or, there's so many different ways that you can accept the feedback without making it a big dramatic thing. You're the one that's making it really dramatic. The other person is just saying, hey, you're supposed to put a comma there, not a semicolon, whatever. Sometimes it's that tiny and you can't pivot. That's a big problem,
Well,
I'm horrible with grammar. You're remembering, Lourdes?
No, you go ahead. You go ahead. I don't want to interrupt you.
Okay. So let's pull back the curtain here. Why is it so painful to be corrected? It's never about the facts. It's always about a deeper need. So what's the deeper need that the ego is so desperately trying to protect? The desire to be right isn't about the facts. It's about a need for security, or it's a need for feeling worthy. There's a need that you're compensating for. Our ego believes that if we're not seen as flawless, we'll be safe. We won't be safe. We have to be seen as perfect. So, we will be safe from judgment if we are flawless. We'll be safe from rejection and from feeling less than when we're flawless. And we're chasing a feeling of invincibility when we buy into that illusion, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, when someone proves you wrong, your mind doesn't just say, oh, new fact. It actually starts to whisper things like, oh, you're not respected. You're not safe. You're not enough. And it's a primal feeling of wanting to be safe. The moment someone challenges our perspective, it feels like our security is being compromised. This, behavior it's a coping mechanism. It's a way we learn to protect ourselves from a feeling of shame or inadequacy that we may have experienced in our past. And we link being right to being in control. And that's what makes us feel safe. Being in control makes us feel safe.
Right. Because, the truth is that a lot of us experience not being safe, whether it's at home or it's at school. And so we develop this protection to feel safe, to have a semblance of, now as an adult, I have some control. And it's really that child that is still trying to get control. And once we, realize, hey, you know what, that was the past. That's when I really didn't have control. And I don't have control now. And it's okay to not have complete control, because nobody does. It's an illusion. Nobody has complete control. I mean, I don't want to go into politics or anything, but look, nobody has control. Look around. It's reality. But, really the irony is, chasing that feeling is really a futile effort. And being wrong doesn't mean you're unworthy. It means you're human. The real corruption isn't the mistake itself. It's the refusal, really, to just let it go. Think of it like this. It's like clinging to, it's like if we want to drink and we're thirsty, right? It's like we're drinking salt water when we're so thirsty. It feels like it's going to quench your need, but it just makes you thirstier. So you think you're going to have control, and you have less control. You're trying to soothe an emotional wound with pride, and it's never going to work. And that need for a validation, that desire to be seen as flawless, is the salt. You can win every argument, but you'll never feel truly secure, because you're trying to satisfy an internal need with an external act.
Yeah, and if you're that person who needs to win every argument, you're probably not a lot of fun to be around. Am I right?
that's
It's kind
that's
of
putting
off-putting.
that's putting mildly.
Oh, yeah. So, the only way to find peace is to stop drinking the salt water, because, what you're actually craving isn't victory, it's peace. And it's not about dominance, it's about connection. And those only come when you're willing to prioritize truth over ego. And what you're actually craving isn't to win, it's to be safe, to be connected, to be seen as worthy. We all want to feel like we're enough, like we're worthy, and we're valued. And we are. But, we've internalized messages from our childhood, and, we've made adjustments to how we behave and react based on those erroneous messages. And you can't get to those by doubling down on a lie. You can only find them by aligning with the truth.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's just throw in a little bit of science, a little bit of why why you actually you're losing control when you're not pivoting, when you're not taking the feedback in stride. When you're corrected, sometimes what's happening is your amygdala is firing, and it's like an alarm, and it's like there's a threat, you're in danger. And that's why, you feel that cortisol and that adrenaline just rushing in your body, and you want to fight or you want to flee. But it's really a false alarm. You're not being attacked. It's something minor, right? There's no tiger chasing you. You aren't in any danger. You're just getting an update, right?
Yeah. And the part of your brain that can override this is the prefrontal cortex, the calm, rational judge that says, let's look at the facts. So think of your brain like a courtroom. The amygdala is the dramatic lawyer yelling, objection, objection. But the prefrontal cortex is the judge who keeps order and says, stick to the evidence. Let's just work with the facts, right?
Right. And, here's the good news. Every time that you choose to allow your prefrontal cortex to come right back online and you choose humility over pride, you're strengthening that pathway. It gets easier. It's like a dance. You learn to pivot, right? And that's the neuroplasticity. It's literally rewiring your brain, and you're going to have peace instead of this ego defense. And if you have this a lot, you're going to have better relationships as well, because people are going to want to be around you because you're more relaxed. You're not in that survival mode anymore. You're calm, right? You're just being.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about how we put this into practice. How do we turn correction into freedom? The moment you feel that urge to defend, don't ignore it. Acknowledge it. This is your cue to practice the humility habit. First, pause the reflex. Notice the flare of defensiveness before you react. And then do a truth check. Ask yourself, do I want to be right? Or do I want the truth?
Right. And this next step is a step that, we both use a lot in our sessions. Flip the frame. See correction not as an attack, but as a gift. Someone just, saved you from persisting in self-deception. Then practice gratitude. Say thank you, even silently. Gratitude rewires your brain to welcome truth. So here's the point. Correction doesn't harm you. Your ego does. And every time you choose truth over pride, you gain strength, freedom, and peace. The underlying issue is never the feedback. It's that there's a part of you that feels attacked. If we can't take feedback, it means that something deeper is at hand.
So true. And we'll leave you with this bit of wisdom. The truth is always a friend. Ignorance is always the enemy.
Yeah, so next time someone proves you wrong, take a breath, reset, and choose freedom over pride. Let us know in the comments how you're practicing the humility habit this week.
Thanks so much for being here. We're walking this path right alongside you. Take care of your heart. Take care of your mind. Take care of yourself. And if you found this helpful, support our work by liking, following, subscribing, and sharing this episode with someone who needs it. We'll see you next time.